And I'll go ahead and get started. So thank you for joining us today. We're going to start the Empowering HBCU Innovations from Lab to Market webinar with our speaker, Nina Archie. We're so excited to hear from Nina, but first I'm going to do a brief introduction of AAAS. So if you don't already know, AAAS stands for the American Association for the Advancement of Science, and it's the oldest and largest general scientific organization in the world. It was founded in the 1800s and currently has over 100,000 members worldwide. AAAS has a for-profit side that consists of membership and journals, and a nonprofit side, which includes the programs that our team works on within our department, inclusive STEM ecosystems for equity and diversity. And the mission of AAAS is to advance science, engineering, and innovation throughout the world for the benefit of all people, advancing science, serving society. And our strategic goals are to advance scientific excellence and achievement and foster equity and inclusion for scientific excellence. For more information on AAAS, you can visit our website, AAAS.org, which is also linked at the bottom of this slide. And one way we fulfill our mission and priorities is through initiatives like the HBCU Innovation Initiative, which I will briefly touch on. So strengthening an inclusive innovation ecosystem through an HBCU community of practice is the initiative that brings us here today. And our mission is to advance innovation capacity at HBCUs, focusing on research, technology, entrepreneurship, and invention. And we are funded by the National Science Foundation. For more information, you can check out our website, which is also linked here. And I also want to briefly acknowledge our project team, including Iris Wagstaff, the program director, and Neela White, our project director, along with the rest of our wonderful team. And we will share the slides and recording within a week from today. And you'll have the chance to ask any questions at the end of today's webinar during the Q&A session. If you have a question that you don't want to forget, feel free to type it in the chat and we'll make sure it gets answered at the end. And without further ado, I'll introduce our speaker. Today is Nina Archie, the CEO and founder of Innovator Connector, and she advocates for diversity, inclusion in the tech ecosystem. She's also held positions as a former patent examiner in the USPTO, as well as a technology transfer specialist at the NIH. And she's also a AAAS HBCU Making an Innovation Showcase Advisory Board member. So thank you so much for being here, Nina, and I will go ahead and pass it along to you to share your slides.
With that being said, we'll get started. So I will basically start. Once again, thank you, Neela and Iris, and the AAAS team for allowing me to present today. We will be going over empowering HBCU innovations from lab to market. Basically, I am your presenter today. Basically, as Claire said to you all, basically I'm a consultant. I basically work with, I mentor students as well as other startups and small business tech companies on startups and how to scale and grow their innovations. I also have previous experience working as a tech transfer specialist. So today we'll go into several different examples on ventures from HBCUs, also talk about lab to market and research and development, and a couple other things to get us going. So I'll go ahead and start. All right. So I first want to, I'm going to hide my top part so you guys can't see it. So the first thing that we will go over today is actually just a session overview. So wanted to, pretty much allow you guys to see like what we want to actually talk about today and why these things are important. So first and foremost, we want to basically discuss the introduction of the process of transforming research and development projects from HBCUs into market-ready products and services. And some of the things that we want to talk about in regards to that is first learning, how to transform those research and development projects into products and services, which is really the whole understanding of commercialization. Then getting into some of the things in regards to funding avenues. So basically a tech transfer office facilitates a lot of the research and development that goes into products and services that can go into market. But with that being said, a lot of professors as well as other entrepreneurs in the community may actually reach out to colleges that have tech transfer offices. And so some of the things that may also be discussed is funding. Where is the funding coming from, whether it's coming from the school itself through a tech transfer office and the funding resources that's coming through that actual, those actual resources that are at the school, but it also could be other sources of funding as well. So we'll get into that. And then lastly, being able to master tech transfer and venture building. So that's just basically being able to gain insights on the tech transfer process if you're not sure what that is, and how people are building ventures from academic institutions. All right, so next we want to discuss the research and development process. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar with the research and development process or what that is, but just wanted to kind of give a brief overview of basically the steps that we do look at when it comes to the research and development process. So one of the first things that you want to actually do if you are basically working in a, not necessarily if you're working in a tech transfer office, but let's say you're working with an academic, working in academia. So you may be a professor, or you may be an entrepreneur that actually is working with a professor on particular research and development. So these are some of the steps that are going to go into process as it relates to being able to commercialize your technology or innovation. And whenever I say commercialize for you all, if you're not familiar with what I mean by that, I mean bringing something from market. So basically, if you're trying to get a product or a service to a customer and you're trying to figure out like, what do I need to do in order for it to be in a store, or in order for someone to be able to purchase it, in order for it to even be in the market to be competitive, there's certain steps and processes that you actually have to do in order to ensure that that does happen. So with that being said, the first thing that you want to look at is, conducting some actual foundational research. That means that, let's just say you're looking at a problem, you're looking at the research of the problem, you're trying to figure out how your technology or innovation can be a solution to the problem. So you're trying to identify potential applications of research findings. You're also trying to, figure out basically if there's something else that may be out there in the market in regards to what is the research that's already out there, if that makes any sense. Next, you want to look at, then once you get some idea on the research and the background of whatever problems you may have, or maybe you may actually just have a great idea and there's a product or service that you're trying to get to market, you always have to do some background research, whether you're trying to research the problem, you're trying to research the background of the market, or you're just trying to research basically what are the different uses that you may use your idea or your product or your service for. Those are all going to be key things as you're trying to move to the next step. So the next step is going to be your proof of concept and your prototyping. So proof of concept means that you're going to be actually trying to really try to develop a prototype to demonstrate feasibility of the innovation. So you want to make sure that this is feasible. Is this something that can be done? Are we going to be able to test this effectively and be able to have some sort of validation that's going to bring us some data, like some real hard data and facts that will be able to back up, moving this technology further in its research and development. So that is the reason why you do proof of concept and you do prototyping. So sometimes people have an idea, it's great, it's in their head, they're trying to put it down on paper. And the first thing they're thinking about is, okay, what do I actually need to do in order to ensure that I basically have something that I have some facts and some data to back up with? And so that's where a prototype comes into play. Because again, your goal is to get to the market. So if you've never tested it out, if you've never had users test it, if you've never received feedback, if you don't know anything about the background of the market that you're in, all these things play into initial research and development, as well as your proof of concept and prototyping. Next, you want to look at the market analysis and your feasibility. So with that being said, you want to assess your market. And the reason why you want to do that is because there are going to be other people that may have something similar to you, or maybe not. But the thing is that you would want to know that for different reasons. One, if you are a professor in a lab, there may be potential collaborators that you can actually work with. Maybe not even at academia, but other third parties. It could be another small business or entrepreneur. Like I mentioned before, there are several tech transfer offices all around the country. in universities or in academia institutions. You could be an entrepreneur that may actually end up working with a university in a tech transfer office, and we'll get into some of the agreements that can go on in that to facilitate that research. But the goal would be to figure out basically not only are there potential competitors in the market, but also are there potential collaborators, people that you can actually work with in order to bring your research to market. Another thing is your actual opportunity, again, to evaluate the viability of the commercialization of your product or service. So if you can't, effectively be able to explain, articulate, how viable is this? Is this, have we tested this out? Have we received any type of feedback? What does the market say about this particular, as it relates to my product or service? What is the market saying about it? Like, you may have something that could be potentially, I wouldn't necessarily say outdated, but maybe there's something that's already an improvement. And then here you are saying, oh, I want to do this and bring this to market, but you hadn't really thought about what is the background of that, or have we tested it out? So that's a really good reason why you want to do a feasibility study. You want to be able to write down your data and your facts from that feasibility study, because that's just going to, again, be able to bring you further into where do you want to go, which is commercialization, which is the equivalent to bringing something into market. So these are all just part of the things of the process. Next, you want to basically get into steps to commercialize your research innovations. So you want to look into product development and testing. So you want to be able to refine the prototype into a market-ready product, and you want to be able to conduct thorough testing through quality assurance. So I'm sure you guys have, let's say you bought something at the grocery store and it worked for everybody, but it just didn't work for you, right? Some particular products, it could be a lotion, sun bath. I mean, what am I trying to say? Sunscreen. It could be something that basically, and maybe what happened was that, they sent it through quality, control, or maybe they didn't. Maybe they sent it, but maybe this particular one had an error with it, or it just didn't work well. Well, you would want to be able to, if it was still in a lab or it hadn't even gotten to market yet, you would want to be able to say, hey, let's figure out what happened with this. Why did this happen? And so those are all the things that go into product development and testing. Is so you, one, can receive feedback. You can get feedback. You may even come up with some additional ideas to what your product could potentially do. That's refining your prototype. And all these things are building up your particular product or service to get it actually to market and get it to market successfully. Like, meaning that there are no errors, there are no bugs. You have thought out the market. You have thought out basically how this product is going to be able to get to market and how effective it will be for your customers. Next, you want to look into the regulatory approvals and compliance. I would say not every innovation or technology may run into this particular problem, but if you ever have, I'm sure you guys have seen it sometimes on commercials, where particularly, I say with health and drug type of products, sometimes they'll say something that says patent pending, but they almost say something that says FDA approved. So regulatory approvals and compliance to deal with the Federal Drug Administration is going to be a huge issue for certain, for particular innovations that have to meet those requirements and policies. And the reason why is because certain countries, particularly United States, for example, are going to have certain regulatory and compliances that your product may have to adhere to in order to bring it to market. So whether it's an investor or you're working with a tech transfer office yourself, or you're a professor yourself, or you're working with a professor, those are going to be some things that you'll have to be able to adhere to, as well as take in consideration and then be in compliance with. Another thing, ensuring compliance with industry standards and regulations. I know that you guys hear a lot about national security. That's another example. So there's certain websites that have to meet 508 compliance. Now, a website, you may not think, oh, that's a product or a service, but in actuality, several different departments or government agencies, they have to reach certain guidelines for national security, which means that even though the website, you may not necessarily consider it a product or service, but they actually have to meet industry standards. And they have to be in compliance, or else they could potentially get shut down, or there could be some repercussions as a result of them not being able to continue to move forward with their processes. The next thing is market launch and commercialization. So once you've gone through the, like I said before, the other steps in the first slide we talked about with the research and development commercialization process, then you move on to your product development and testing and regulatory approvals, ensure those, check those boxes. The lastly is you want to be able to market to launch. I mean, do a market launch, and you want to be able to now actually bring it to market. So this is going to require what? Some form of marketing efforts, maybe even getting a marketing person that can be able to help you be able to bring this to market. You've already probably, I would say either you're doing it at that point or you're probably figuring out who your customer discovery is. Because again, you may be interested in an untapped market. Maybe you have a product that's never been used in a particular market and you're like, hey, I know it works well. I did my research in my initial process and development of research in the beginning, but hey, through this process, we've learned that there may be another untapped market that we actually can we can actually tap into. Well, this would be a good time to do it. And so with that being said, you're going to want to have a go-to-market strategy, which is going to be a lot about storytelling. So it's going to be one, the commercialization plan that you have that you want to bring it to market. But then secondly, you're going to also have like an actual strategy that you want to be able to have, meaning that it could be a pitch deck with a storytelling in it. It could be you actually, again, when you're working in a tech transfer setting, because I know we're talking a lot about tech transfer. When you're working in tech transfer, and you're working with, again, a professor, or you're working with research and development, I would say that you're probably leaning on your tech transfer office, probably a lot more for those marketing efforts. But a lot of times in tech transfer offices, they do a lot of licensing. And so a lot of times what happens is that that particular department, as I say, for example, National Institute of Health, they actually, post several different licensing opportunities on their, they may have like a, particular website or board, but essentially is there to attract people who are interested in licensing the opportunity. And we'll get into a little bit about licensing agreements a little bit later. But I do want you all to know that these are like pretty much the prime steps of trying to bring something to market. And so when you're bringing it to market, it can be done in numerous ways. But initially, like I said before, you want to be able to have like a solid product that you can actually tell a story on, which is be your go-to-market strategy. But then also it'll be, well, what do we want to do in order to bring this to market? Maybe you do want to license out your technology. Maybe you don't want to license out your technology, but you are open to consumers or some type of business model where maybe other organizations are being able to use it through a pilot program or a partnership and so forth. So next, like I said before, this is just me really wanting you guys to know and emphasize what are the actual detailed steps from research to market. So one of the first things with initial research and development is you want to be able to conduct that foundational research to identify innovative solutions for market potential. So how do you do that? Like, what would you do? So the first thing that you would do would be able to define the problem or need and set research goals. Then you want to be able to assemble a multidisciplinary research team that you may have. Next, you want to be able to conduct preliminary experiments and studies on that. And then lastly, you want to be able to document those findings and iterate their research if necessary. I brought this slide. This is the initial one that we talked about in the first bullet point in the previous slides. And I brought this slide up mainly is because this is the first thing that you do. This is like very, very, very important. And what I mean by that is that we went through all of the different steps, but this one is the most important because this helps you with like really building and bringing your structure and foundation into everything else that's going to happen along the process. And so if you have ever, I'm not sure where everyone is in this process, but if you've never done a pitch deck before, and let's say you have this great idea, but you've never actually talked about what the problem is. So you may have like this eureka moment where you're like, oh, I want to do such and such, but you never clearly identified what your problem is. If you're ever, talking to whether you're working with a tech transfer office like I said before, you're a professor, or you're working with a tech transfer office, or you're just pitching in general to bring something to market, people want to know like where did this all come from? Like you have a solution, but was there a problem that, that this actually came from? Secondly is being able to really articulate who your team is. Whether you are basically working with the tech transfer office or you're applying for funding, and we'll get into that too. If you are a person that has not been able to articulate who you are, what your role is, and your role in the actual product, what am I trying to say? Product or service that you have, being able to articulate that clearly helps anybody that you're working with, because then they can also see like the resources that you may need for your team. They want to know the competency of your team. So like, let's say the CEO is really good at, basically the marketing component. And then another person on the team is really good at handling all of the testing and the monitoring and validation of the processes that are going on, as well as some of the things that are going on in your trials or your experiments. And then there may be somebody else that handles all of the compliance. Like they're very good at being able to, figure out basically, are you guys adhering to, certain, again, regulatory approvals or compliances that you may have. So just being able to explain like your team is also going to be extremely important. And then, like I said before, being able to document what your actual, findings are going to be extremely important as well. All right, so now we want to get into the importance of intellectual property protection. So basically, whenever you're working, or say not whenever you're working, but if you are working with a tech transfer office or you are, basically working on a particular technology innovation and you run across, okay, does this need IP protection? Are we at a place where we need IP protection? Well, one, I would say if anyone is not familiar with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, AAAS can definitely provide resources, and we can let you all know about what those actual resources are for small businesses and entrepreneurs. But tech transfer offices also has several different support resources as well to kind of help you with like basically if you need something that needs to be protected through IP. Now, another thing, the reason why intellectual property protection is very, very important, because at some point you may also be basically trying to figure out if whether or not you need to actually draft some form of intellectual property strategy. So not only are you focusing on like, hey, do I need to file a trademark? Do I need to file a patent? But then also, what is my IP strategy? So as your company grows and scales, you're going to be wanting to assess everything that you're doing from an IP standpoint. One, that's going to help you with investors. Secondly, it's going to help you with like internally in the company, you all being able to, the company being able to examine their worth, meaning that as your product or technology or anything that you're working with, as you continue to scale and grow, you want to be able to make sure that like, hey, we may have some IP potentially here, or we do have IP potentially here. This is what we're able to do with this. And then when you're also actually talking to others about your particular intellectual property, you're able to, let them know that, hey, I have this many patents, or, basically when we started off, we were worth this, but now we've been able to leverage what our IP is. So a tech transfer office is really, really good resource for numerous reasons. One, they will be able to also help you with those resources for intellectual property protection. When you actually do any type of licensing agreements, maybe potentially with a particular professor that you may be working with, IP may come up. So any type of compliance or agreements, you're going to basically you're going to get to a place where you're trying to also negotiate terms on the IP. I'll give you an example. I worked at a tech transfer office, and one of the scientists had materials that came from a third party, right? So it came from another academia institution that was a professor. So they were collaborating together, right? And then secondly, they were like, hey, we want to further this research, but I got some materials from someone else. So who's going to be, if something great comes out of this, what does the IP look like on both parties, or two parties, or three parties? So all of that has to be basically negotiated, articulated, and basically everyone should be on the same page. And so that is the importance of one, intellectual property protection. But then secondly, not only just the protection of it, but just your strategy of basically being able to understand whether you are a professor that's working in an academic institution, Or like I said before, maybe you are a small business third party that's working with a professor at a tech transfer institution, being able to understand basically, even if you borrowed some materials or someone borrowed some materials from you, being able to understand basically what that agreement should look like as it relates to IP is going to always come up, and it's going to be very important. So just wanted to also point that out. All right, so I've mentioned agreements a couple of times to y'all. And I know you're all like, what are these agreements? Why does she keep referring to that? What is that? What does that actually mean? So if you were, for example, in an actual tech transfer office, or let's say, for example, you're working with a professor from a tech transfer office. And might I add, I say academia, but tech transfer offices are also in government. So as I'm saying tech transfer, please note that this includes academic institutions, but also includes federal government institutions as well. So with that being said, there are numerous different agreements and licensing processes that basically one can adhere to or one may go through. And so when someone says, oh, I work in a tech transfer office, one of their roles may or may not be, but could potentially be actually just negotiating the agreements alone, meaning that basically you have a scientist that you're working with, they're working on some particular research, and they're working with several different third parties, somebody from academia, they're working with Joe Blow that has a startup, they're working with someone else at another government agency. And what may need to happen? A non-disclosure agreement. What may need to happen? A material transfer agreement, a collaborative research agreement, a licensing agreement, and licensing processes. And so as I go through each one of these, one of the things I want to note to you all is one, if you are basically looking at certain key agreements that you need to do in order to make sure that there's confidentiality between all parties, the NDA is going to always be first. And now when I say non-disclosure, I also mean CDA, which is a confidentiality agreement as well. But typically those are like the first thing that happens, meaning that between two parties or two or more parties, no one wants, any type of information that's shared between two to be actually like spread to people outside of those people that signed that agreement, right? So with that being said is if I have, let's say I have an invention, I want to work with a professor at National Institute of Health. We've been talking, before we talk, I'm just gonna say, we have discussed, very low level things, but eventually we want to get into some really, really great details and specifics. What do we need to do? Before anything, we need to have a non-disclosure agreement signed so we can actually move forward in our process. Another thing that I just mentioned earlier is material transfer agreement. So when I said to you earlier about basically, if you want to be able to protect your intellectual property and some of the agreements that would take place, well, a material transfer agreement will actually take place. So these are all the different things that will go into research to market, particularly in tech transfer. So if someone basically that's outside of the institution you're working with may have some materials that they want to give to someone else. I'm sure that some of you guys have heard about, basically, oh, I needed to test some samples. And so there was some cells that came from another lab. This particular scientist says, hey, I really want to use these cells. This scientist says, sure, why not? Well, in order for that to happen, there again will have to be some form of way to make sure that the agreement of the materials that are transferred are in compliance, meaning that the people, the two parties or two or three parties agree on those materials, one being transferred. But secondly, if there's any IP that rises out of that, all that needs to be in the agreement. It needs to be actually like written into either the agreement or there has to be some discussion around that. And that is basically some of the gist of the material transfer agreements. In regards to the collaborative research agreements, again, you're outlining the terms of the joint research projects that you have between institutions and industry partners. Industry partners are typically private partners. So industry means somebody maybe from academia, it could be maybe even like maybe a private or a small business. And then an institution could be, again, maybe someone in federal government. But usually when I speak of institutions, I'm usually speaking of either academia and government, and then industry, which is like probably somebody that is in the private market in some form or fashion. And then, like I said, licensing agreements. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but you want to be able to have a licensing agreement, one, to grant rights to the use of the intellectual property under defined conditions. So, for example, some people want to still own their IP, but they may not necessarily be at a place where they want to actually like continue to manufacture their technology. So they may say, hey, I basically want to keep my IP, but I want to be able to license out my technology to someone else where they can use it, but I still keep, ownership of my IP. That typically happens in a licensing agreement, but there's certain conditions and terms that actually have to go into that. And so a good example again is a scientist at National Institute of Health. They have a technology, they could shelve it and not even worry about it anymore. But they say, oh, maybe I do, maybe somebody else I know is really interested in trying to bring this to market. So I may not want to do this, but someone else may be interested, but I still want to own my own IP. But then that's where a licensing agreement will come in play. And a lot of times in government that you may see is that, again, if you ever see something that says licensing opportunity, it means that some scientists or someone from an institution may work really hard on some research and development and gotten like a product to, again, its prototype to like a very good product that's ready to scale and go to market, but they may not want to actually, do it themselves. So they say, okay, let's see if we can license this out to someone who is interested. And so that is how an agreement can kind of get started and get into place. And so lastly, these are just some of the licensing processes that you could also go to in order to negotiate those licensing agreements and consideration for like royalty rates, so licensing and anything in regards to exclusivity. So next, another thing that goes into, I would say, mainly just you kind of understanding what your venture is their TRL stages. So being able to understand your technology readiness level in a particular technology is always really important. So this particular standard is actually a standard that the NASA has made. And so basically, this really just gives you an outline of front and being able really to articulate where you actually are. So when you're bringing something to market, you want to be able to also be able to know exactly where the technology is. Is it at TRL 1, technology readiness 1, or is it a technology ready levelness 9? Typically 9 means that it's probably either in the market or should be in the market, if that makes any sense. Another one is the manufacturing readiness level. So we just went over technology readiness level, but manufacturing means that once again, you've talked about your prototype, how to build it, you may be building it out, but now you're at a place where you're saying, hey, I really need to know, now I'm in a place of manufacturing. So I'm trying to actually build this hardware or software that I have. And there's some steps that I need to be able to understand and where I should take. So again, this is another structured identification tool for you to be able to know exactly, am I at manufacturing readiness level 1, where you're just basically, identifying manufacturing implications that you need in order to get your proof of concept developed. Or you could be, again, at a very high rate of manufacturing readiness level 9, where you're at a place where you actually have some production that you've gotten from your product or proof of concept or prototype. And so with that production is being demonstrated, you're collecting data, it's somewhat in the market. So that means you probably have some users, you have a little bit of customer discovery. And so you're able to, again, be able to not only articulate your MRL level, but you're at a place where you can say, this is where I am in the market. And so I basically made this just so you guys can kind of see what this will look like. I took this from another slide. So if you see Black Tech Saturdays on there, it's just because I thought this would be a really good slide for you guys as well. So with that being said, if you all basically were in a tech transfer office, you go to the tech, you either are a professor working inside of the tech transfer office, or you go to one and you are an entrepreneur or a small business, and you're trying to figure out what stage you're at. Or someone asks you what stage you're at. these are some of the things that you can potentially be able to identify for yourself. Are you in idea phase? Are you in a pre-seed phase? Are you in a seed stage or series A or series B? And again, this goes from like the lowest of, I would say lowest, but you being an idea, the concept, all the way to market. So I would say basically, if you're probably in pre-seed or seed stage, then that means that you're probably in the commercialization phase of trying to get something actually into market. And so I actually tagged the TRL, the technology readiness level stages, to this. So like if you're in idea phase and you're probably at a technology readiness level 1 to 2 or manufacturing readiness level 1. And then some of the suggested, funding that you may have for that, maybe some small grants or competitions, or early research for that. So just wanted to kind of, pretty much bring this slide in. I thought this is a really good way for people to really identify sometimes where they are when they're actually looking at, one, their technology, or again, like I said before, you are potentially a person who works you could be working in academia. And let's just say, you are an inventor or a scientist. And so you're talking to industry or you're talking to other people about your particular technology, and just being able to sometimes to understand the vernacular of different things of like, hey, this is the stage I'm in. This is the TRL that I'm in. This is the MRL stage that I'm in. This is some of the funding that I've been looking into. It's always very helpful. All right. So next, I want to get into some of the real world examples from HBCUs that, I have seen myself when it comes to the research and development, process, bringing something to market. So we have the first example, North Carolina A&T University. They have an innovation that is a smart agriculture sensors and data analytics innovation tool, right? Their background is that they have a robust agricultural research program. The university's research team has developed smart sensors and data analytics technologies aimed at optimizing agriculture productivity and sustainability. So what are they trying to actually do here? Well, it looks like what is the first thing they want to do? They want to do some initial research and development. How do they want to do that? They want to use a research team. They want to identify basically what their efficient farming techniques are to address the issues that they have to crop yield and resource management. They want to be able to then develop smart sensors that are capable of monitoring the soil moistures on nutrient levels and weather conditions in real time. And then they want to next do a proof of concept and prototyping for that. So they want to use initial prototypes that are going to be tested on their university-owned agricultural land, and then collect that data. Next, they want to look at the market analysis and feasibility study. So they want to actually conduct, meaning that they want to conduct a market analysis to understand what is the potential demand for smart agriculture technologies overall. So initially, we talked about basically trying to figure out whether or not your technology is feasible. If you can't talk about what your market is doing, that's going to be really hard for someone to basically be able to help you or even get your technology to market if you can't articulate what's going on in the market, if that makes any sense. Next is the product development and testing. So if you have prototypes that were refined based on feedback from initial tests and further field trials that were conducted, next you could actually use those sensors and integrate them into data analytics platforms to provide actionable insights into farmers. Like I said before, you had a team and you said, hey, we also need to do a checkbox of regulatory approvals and compliance. So we want to also make sure that we are looking at necessary certifications that we need for our sensor technology, and make sure that we're also in compliance standards. Because one thing you don't want to do is you bring something to market or you plan to bring something to market, and then you're like, oh my gosh, we didn't get this certification, or oh my gosh, we didn't make sure this compliance situation was not up to par. And so here you are trying to plan to go to market, and now you may be like, okay, I may need to take a step back for a minute in order to make sure I have these other things in place. And then lastly, like again, our goal is to get to market. So you're working with a tech transfer office yourself, or again, you're our professor and maybe you have a spin-off company. So now you're saying, okay, I have a market launch and I have a commercialization product, and I have done a spin-off company, meaning now I've created Agritech Innovations that's formed to commercialize the technology. I now have some strategic partnerships with agricultural cooperatives and extension services into the market. And then I successfully, launched my product at what agricultural trade show, somewhere where the market, somebody's going to be interested as a customer. So that's the first example. What are the outcomes that we want to get, or what did North Carolina A&T want to get from this? So one, they wanted to get agri-tech innovation successfully penetrated into the market, offering affordable and scalable solutions to farmers. They also wanted to basically commercialize the technology to do what? Create jobs and contribute to the local economy. So one good thing I would say about tech transfer that I think is almost like a hidden gem for local communities as well as the economy is basically when you do have professors that are working on technologies at that particular institution. And let's say there is a third party, such as a small business or startup or a company that basically is working, with that professor on furthering that research and development. It typically will more than likely create jobs for that economy. So that actually checks the economic development initiative, whether it's through basically the jobs that are created, as well as other resources that may actually revitalize or, basically actually be able to basically do more things with that particular community that may not have been done before. And then the agricultural impact, farmers using the technology reported to increase crop yields and reduce resource storage. So the impact here, probably I'm going to say 9 times out of 10 relates to the actual problem. More than likely, when they started this, they probably saw that there was a problem in regards to resource wastage, as well as what was going on with the crop fields. And then this particular HBCU basically saw, hey, here's the problem. Here's where our technology innovation, agri-tech innovation can be a solution. And let's see what we can do moving forward. Okay, so then another one, I'll use another example. So I went to the first one pretty extensively, but I know that we've got a couple more slides. So I'm going to kind of just do a brief overview, but here's another example of another one. So we have Howard University, and they are looking at an innovation where they have this portable diagnostic device for chronic disease management, right? So their background is that they have a strong focus on biomedical research. They have a multidisciplinary team of researchers at the university, developed a portable diagnostic device designed to monitor and manage chronic diseases in what areas? Diabetes as well as hypertension. So what do they want to do in order to basically bring this to market? So again, let's look at basically the steps that we've been talking about in our previous slides. So the first thing that they want to do is have a team that identifies the gap in the market for portable, easy-to-use diagnostic devices that can provide real-time monitoring for chronic diseases such as diabetes and hypertension. Then they wanted to look at the research to develop a compact device that integrates that multiple diagnostic function to include blood glucose and blood pressure monitoring. Next, they wanted to look at their proof of concept and prototype, and they wanted to do this through a prototype that was created under initial testing in a controlled environment. And then they wanted to use that device to actually do some reliable measurements and comparable existing clinical equipment. So the next thing, like I said before in the previous example, is we still want to walk through these processes. So one, you're going to want to look at the market. Who is the market? The market is going to be home healthcare environments or solutions. I should say home healthcare ecosystems. That's what I'll put it as that. And look at those solutions in that ecosystem. Then you want to look at what type of targeted group. You want to look at patients that have chronic diseases and diabetes and hypertension or anything associated or related to that. Then you want to look at, how do I refine my prototype? So what am I going to do now? I want to be able to test this prototype. I want to figure out what users, what patients that have chronic diseases with hypertension and diabetes, how are they actually working well with this device? Is this going to be successful for them to be able to use? So you're going to be conducting clinical trials in collaboration with local hospitals. So that will be a partner that you want to work with in order to make sure that, hey, I have my customer discovery or user discovery or targeted group. Those are the patients with the chronic diseases. where they're going to be found likely in the local hospitals. And you want to be able to use your technology, which is a solution device, to basically see and check the performance of what it's able to do with these particular people. Again, I mentioned earlier to you guys that sometimes you may not always have a technology that has that needs FDA approval, but in this particular situation, you do, right? So this device that was obtained for FDA approval needs to meet all necessary medical device regulations. And they also have to check not only the United States, but they also have to check the international standards allowed for global distribution. So one thing that I would say, whether it's tech transfer, whether you're working with a tech transfer office, or you are working just in your research, furthering your research and development, whether it's government or industry, one of the things that you're always going to have to do is basically look at what are the standards that you need to basically adhere to. And some of those could be international. So you can't just pay attention to like, okay, in my small community in Kansas City, this is what we do. You know, you do have to take things a step further. So that's what Howard University did. And so the market launch that they did was the university established a startup company through their tech transfer office called Health Tech Diagnostics to bring this device to market. Then they facilitated partnerships with healthcare providers and insurance companies to get into the market and facilitate the market industry and build a pipeline. And then the device was launched through online platforms and healthcare product distributors. Now, earlier I mentioned to you guys market launch and commercialization. And one of the key things I said was, what was the go-to-market strategy? So these 3 bullets are pretty much what you would consider a go-to-market strategy. So if someone ever asks you, what is your go-to-market strategy? It should look something like this. Meaning that you say, okay, we have this product, we've been working with a tech transfer office, or I'm a professor, I work in a tech transfer office. Our go-to-market strategy is what? We want to first establish a startup company. Not saying it has to be a startup company, it could have been a spin-off company, like the last example. Next, we want to have partnerships with healthcare providers and insurance companies. And then lastly, in our go-to-market strategy, we want to launch this through online platforms and healthcare product distributors. And then, like I said before, you want to go through and have something that actually you talk about what was the market success when you actually launched, what was the health impact that you actually had, meaning that the health impact is likely going to solve for like a big problem. So you hope that, you know, your device is a solution for the problem that you stated, you know, initially early on. And then what is the technological advancement? And so in this case, the success of the device for further innovation and research at Howard University, leading to the development of additional healthcare solutions. All right, so next I want to get into basically some actual HBCU venture examples. So this is where we're just going to talk specifically about a particular faculty member. So let's just say a tech transfer office, because again, not every university has a tech transfer office, but I say that in the sense of saying, now I'm getting into examples where the school may not have a tech transfer office, but this particular faculty is actually a person who has research and development that they want to further along. So they're either going to be doing this through like resources from the tech transfer office or other resources outside of that. But once again, this is an innovation that's renewable energy solutions for low-income communities. The institution of the faculty member is coming from where? Tuskegee University. They've developed an innovative renewable energy solution designed to provide affordable and sustainable energy to low-income communities. And so what are the steps that they want to take? So one of the first steps they want to take to build and scale their venture is they want to conduct research on renewable energy technologies and their applications in low-income communities. Secondly, what do they want to do? They want to develop a prototype to integrate those solar panels and battery storage systems. Then they want to move into their proof of concept and pilot testing. Again, whenever you talk about proof of concept and prototypes, you're doing that because you want to be able to test things out. You need to know if this is going to work. You also need some hard data in order to continue to scale and grow and build the venture that you want to be able to build. And then next, again, the process hasn't changed at all. So you're going to be looking at the market analysis, testing out the market, again, refining your prototype. So looking at the product development and what actual partnerships may go along with that. Again, your regulatory approvals and your market launch and scaling. And again, this is your go-to-market strategy here at the end. Next, you want to be able to know what was the market success, what was the social impact, and what was the economic impact. All right, so we have another one. This is one where it's not a faculty member. This is actually a student venture that they want to build to scale, right? So with this, they have a group of students that develop a mobile health application. And they did this to aim at promoting mental wellness among college students. So again, this is at a university, the group of students. They saw some reason for developing this mobile health application, and they're trying to basically move forward. Well, how do they actually get this actually going or build this skill to venture? So these are some of the things or steps that they did in order to do that. They first figured out what was their initial idea in research. So again, research is always going to be the first thing that you do. Secondly, you wanted to get into what your prototype development actually is. So you want to develop a basic version of the app that you actually have. Thirdly, you want to get into your market analysis and user research that you have as well. Then you want to get into product enhancement. So you have an app, typically, especially if it's driven by AI, you're going to be making some different features. You're going to be making some changes. You're going to be testing it out and constantly probably going into, what can I do to make this stand out? What can I do to make this easier? What can I do to make this more efficient? So that is actually the goal. And then lastly, and again, funding partnerships, you want to have that in order to continue to grow and scale and build the scale to venture. And then lastly, you want to be able to do what? You want to be able to launch this particular product. So again, this all goes into go-to-market strategy. How does that happen? You want to launch the app on major platforms, iOS and Android. How do you want to do that? You want to promote the app through social media, campus events, partnerships with student organizations. So these are this is again, an example of an HBCU venture that basically you wanted to build and scale the venture. And these are the steps that you would take in order to move that forward. And then once again, you want to look at the outcomes and impact of the market. What did the market look like? And what was the success of it? What was the health impact? And what was the growth and expansion? And this is the last example for venture, HBCU venture. So Morehouse College and Spelman College. Now, I use this example to show you that whether you're in a working in a tech transfer office, or a professor's working in a tech transfer office, or you're working with one, several times universities work together, or government works together, or government and universities work together, or maybe a small company works together. But I just wanted you guys to see that these are two institutions that came together in a collaborative effort to do what? They wanted to focus on smart water management system designed to optimize water usage in urban areas. Obviously, you guys know Morehouse and Spelman are both in where? Atlanta, Georgia. So this is obviously, beneficial for both of the schools to be able to do this because it's in the same area as well. And so what do they want to do? They want to basically have a system that has sensors and data analytics to monitor water consumption and detect leaks in real time. So once again, they're taking their venture through a process. They're taking it through the initial collaboration and research, the prototype development, and then they're going through the testing of it, the market analysis, making sure it's feasible, to refining it, looking at, again, their regulatory approvals and compliance, and then their go-to-market strategy as to what they want to do. Now, in this particular situation, and again, we've talked about several different ways that you can basically do several different agreements or collaborations with other organizations. So as you can see, Spelman and Morehouse decided to do a joint venture. So their go-to-market strategy is a joint venture called AquaSmart Technologies to commercialize the system. So whenever someone asks you, what is your go-to-market strategy? They're trying to ask you basically hey, do you have a joint venture? Is it a spinoff company you're going to establish? Are you just going to establish a startup company? what is the faculty member doing something separately or doing something with the university or with another institution? These are all the things that you want to ask. I mean, that someone, if someone's talking to you about a particular technology, they want to know in regards to the commercialization. So as you can see, this is our sixth example, but they're doing a joint venture called AquaSmart Technologies. And what they did was, to commercialize it, they launched marketing campaigns targeting urban municipalities and water utilities, and they secured funding this time through venture capitalists and government programs. So they actually use diverse funding mechanisms and to ensure that this joint venture will actually get launched and kicked off. And as you all saw in my previous slides, where I showed you the different diverse funding, where I showed you the stages, the technology readiness level, the manufacturing readiness level, and then I talked about basically how those associated with those particular funding. So in this particular venture, they use these venture capitalists as well as government programs for their funding. And then lastly, they basically looked at the market, like we said before. They looked at their impact and their collaborative growth. So in this situation, they were, again, looking at, because it's in an urban area that's obviously near each other, they continue to want to expand product offerings based on emerging technologies and market needs within Morehouse and College, which is within their particular urban areas of their. So I mentioned to you in this last one, joint venture. So these are just some of the, I'm going to give you guys an overview of venture capital. So when you're talking about funding innovations, you can talk about anything. We can talk about anything from government programming to also venture capital. So one thing with venture capital, some people aren't familiar with venture capital. That is basically where you're looking at equity that will be pretty much invested in your company through funding. And ways to get that is through investors. And ways to attract investors is through, one, you actually pitching through a pitch deck, as well as highlighting your unique value proposition of your particular technology that you have, as well as the market potential. So all that research that you do, I think in the pretty much the first step, and then the feasibility study that we talked about that you did, that you saw in those other examples, a lot of that has to do with your unique value proposition that you will be selling or pitching to an investor, as well as the market potential. And then when you're pitching to VCs, you want to make sure you tailor the pitch to the interests of the potential investors that you have. And of course, they're going to have questions about financial projections and scalability. That, again, that scalability component that we're talking about has a lot to do with the feasibility step that we mentioned earlier. And then structuring investment deals. That means that there'll be some form of agreement structuring that you will actually go through. Now, this is similarly, but not the same as a licensing opportunity, meaning that when we spoke about material agreements, confidentiality agreements, certain agreements as it relates to licensing the opportunity, meaning that you own the IP, someone else wants to take this technology, they want to license it so they can use it themselves. That's a different type of agreement than negotiating terms in regards to funding, in regards to someone investing in the actual company, startup, or technology that you actually have. So I just wanted to pinpoint that as well. But this, again, is just a brief overview of VC. Next, like I said before, in that last example, when we talked about Morehouse and Spelman doing a joint venture, and we talked about venture capital and government funding. So these are just some of the examples of some funding that you could potentially actually, I guess it's like go after, or could be potentially awarded. So small business innovation research is pretty much something that's heavily probably used in a tech transfer office, as well as small business technology transfer proposals. So the difference between SBIRs, which is the small business innovation research, it's mainly for startups and small businesses to actually apply for funding. When you talk about small business technology transfer, that is solely, it's like almost like a set aside, but it's solely for being awarded, it's being awarded to support collaborative research and development between small business and research institutions. So actually, I should say that small business technology transfer proposals are usually what's being used in universities primarily. So if you're a professor, like we talked about the Tuskegee faculty member, and he wanted to work with, let's say, a small business, pretty much for the most part, it would be through the small business technology transfer proposal. And then another example is the National Institute of Health funding or Department of Defense funding. So these are grants, as well as Department of Defense has several different contracting vehicles and programs that support innovation as well. But these are just a little bit of an overview of those things. But again, your tech transfer office likely will have the resources as well as know about some of these funding programs that will be able to help assist. But the goal, again, whether it's VC, government grants and funding, is to further the research and development. That is what essentially in tech transfer you would want to do. And then in regards to scaling and innovation. So we talked a lot about earlier manufacturing readiness levels and what type of where you may be with your manufacturing. So the reason why I brought the MRL readiness levels up and the reason why I actually had them on this slide is because that gets into prototype and production. And so anytime you're trying to basically commercialize a product and you're trying to get it from point A to point Z, you want to basically you're going to eventually have to go into supply chain and looking at basically how do I get this product from A to Z, right? Or get it from refining the prototype and getting into the market. And that is likely going to be through some form of manufacturing. So with that being able to say, from prototype to production, you want to be able to look at manufacturing your considerations. So you may have to evaluate manufacturing options and partners, meaning that you have to find a manufacturer. For some people that may not know, all over the country, there's manufacturing extension networks. So there's manufacturing facilities, the same way there's small business development centers and tech transfer offices around the country, solely for manufacturing. So MEP, Manufacturing Extension Partnership Network, is solely for manufacturing. And then quality control. So with manufacturing, we talked about earlier, let's say you get like a sunscreen and it works for everybody, but it didn't work for you, right? Or I shouldn't say it didn't work for you, but let's say there was a glitch in the one that you actually had, but everybody else's, it was fine. So with that being said, you typically don't want that to happen. So usually you want to have, be able to have a product that's going to be effective and sustainable. And you want it to actually go through some form of manufacturing quality assurance standards to ensure that when you do your testing protocols and you measure this against the standards and criteria for product quality, that it goes through and it's hitting an A and not a, obviously something lower than an A for whatever your quality grade is. And then a distribution strategy, as well as time delivery and customer satisfaction. And I think I went over those already. Yep. And so this pretty much concludes my presentation. Like I said before, wanted to give you guys an overview of lab to market, give you several different examples of basically real world lab to market as it relates to certain HBCU ventures, as well as the steps that basically one would go through if they're actually trying to bring something from lab to market, and then also give you some examples of how someone will build to scale, whether they're going through a joint venture or a spinoff company, working with the tech transfer office. So I hope these slides were helpful to you guys. I definitely can send these over to Ms. Iris and Neela, and I'll let you guys kind of ask me some questions, and I'll let Ms. Iris and Neela kind of take the floor.
Thank you so much. Claire, did you have any words? If not, we can go into questions. Thank you so much, Nina, for this awesome, very, very valuable information. And for those of you that may have joined a little late in the intro, we did mention that we will be sharing a PDF of the slides as well as the recording within a week. Feel free to come off of mute and ask your question. We definitely want to, respect your time and end at 4:30. Claire is also dropping the survey link in the chat, and we will follow up via email. Please complete the survey so you can just inform us and let us know, how these webinars are helping. We really appreciate Nina taking time out. So feel free to go ahead and ask your questions if there are any. So while Claire is dropping the link in the chat, Nina, what are some things that, especially if they're the students that in the chat, what are some things that they could be doing right now to like better prepare themselves in addition to participating in webinars like this?
Prepare themselves for work. What is that? I just want to
Yeah,
make
to
sure I'm
be in a
clear.
position to work in the area of tech transfer, and like we
Oh,
may have
yes.
some cohort students on this call as well. Like, what could they be doing like right now?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So I know I went over several different venture examples and real world examples that, I mentioned in regards to how to build and scale a venture, as well as looking at, what a national university is doing. So one of the things that I, would recommend if you're interested in tech transfer yourself, I actually had an internship when I was in college at a university that had a tech transfer office. And so one of the things that I did do was be able to assess the research and development that was coming for an actual professor and what they were actually working on. And they actually filed a patent application while I was actually in that office as well, while I was interning. So it gave me an opportunity to learn a lot about patenting and inventions, but then how that related to the tech transfer office, what the tech transfer office provided, and then just being able to like understand certain technologies that are going on with faculty members. So as I was mentioning you guys before, showing you different examples of the research and development commercialization process. Yes, if you're interested in kind of learning more about that process and what happens with it, I definitely think that being able to go to whether it's your university or another university, because again, tech transfer offices kind of are like a resource to the community. So I try to say that it is not just solely for faculty members. So some people just think like, oh, it's just for, the people that work there. And that's actually not true. Like a lot of times entrepreneurs go to tech transfer offices that are neighboring to them in order to get the help and resources that they need. So you being a student that's very interested, like going to your neighboring tech transfer office is actually a good resource, and actually asking them, like you say, hey, is there a way where maybe I can work with a university professor or work in that office all together to kind of learn about what the faculty members are actually doing research on, and then seeing if there are any other opportunities to, like I said before, look at the market, or look at, particular technologies that are coming out. What type of technologies? Like we talked about a lot about, basically the go-to-market strategy. So this university established a startup company. We talked about another university that did a joint venture. So just being able to even understand, basically what those faculty members are doing with their technologies is going to be good for you as well.
Thanks again. This has been so valuable and so helpful. Thank you again. And thank you for your support, being just such an awesome advisory board member for our efforts as well. Again, thank you for your efforts. On behalf of our team, Neela, Claire, Kavita, myself, I'll pause again to see if there are any questions. I don't see any hands. I don't see anyone coming off mute, so I'll pause for about 15 seconds to see if there are any questions. Okay, I see none, and we want to be respectful of your time and end on time. So thank you all again for joining us. We did drop some links in the chat. Please complete the survey so we know how we're doing, what you're interested in seeing. Also follow us on social media, and we dropped some links to our website, our impact report, as well as other information on this initiative. We shared a link to our impact video, and I'll just repeat, if you missed the earlier announcements, we will be sharing a PDF of the slides as well as the recording later this week, either by the end of this week or by the end of next week. Thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your day.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.